And welcome to Washington Unplugged, a big busy day in Washington. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has been meeting with President Obama this morning. You may have seen their joint news conference earlier today. They were definitely of one voice on Iran. The president made no effort to back away from anything, any of the criticism he has issued about Iran. He said no, he is not apologizing for anything he has said. And he remarked again that the world is watching what is happening in Iran. He called on the leaders there to relax and give people there a chance to express their views. The German Chancellor was right with him on that. She did say, however, that she and the Germans are taking no responsibility on what to do or with or about the prisoners that are now in Guantanamo. Of course, the president has said he wants to close Guantanamo within the next year. Angela Merkel seemed to say today that's up to President Obama. Not surprising that she said that Germany is not interested in taking any of the prisoners, since, as we have been hearing here in Washington, the Congress, members of Congress are saying they don't want them here in the United States. Talk about this a little bit. The senior visiting fellow to the American Institute for Contemporary German Studies, Gerry Livingston. Mr. Livingston, what is, would you say, the state of relations between the United States and Germany these days?
I think they're middling to good. Angela Merkel made a great effort with Bush to maintain good relations. And of course, it's much easier with Obama because the German public is as enthusiastic about him as the American public, maybe even more so, whereas the German public was not very enthusiastic about Bush. America remains an important ally for Germany, but not the most important ally. Germany's priority it derives from its membership in the European Union, and it gives priority to considerations of Europe, whereas the United States today gives priority to considerations of the Middle East and Asia.
It's very interesting to say that America is not Germany's most important ally. I think that just shows the changing landscape of the world as we're now coming to know it. Obviously, that is an important part. The alliance is an important part. Interesting today that the Chancellor was very much just right with Barack Obama on the whole question of Iran, expressed concern about their ability to develop a nuclear weapon, said that Russia and China must be brought into this. We hear the same thing from this administration. But she made no bones about it, and the president said himself, he said before she spoke, that she had made no commitment about what to do with these prisoners. As I said just a second ago, I don't find that all that surprising, in that the U.S. Congress is telling the president, members of Congress, they don't want any of these prisoners settled in their districts. So what did you make of that?
Well, I think she recognizes the importance of the congressional viewpoint. One thing that's very important to remember about Germany is that the executive branch, that is the Chancellor, does not have as much power relatively in foreign policy as the American president does. Not only does the parliament, the Bundestag, have to approve, for example, every troop increase in Afghanistan, the parliament has to approve it. And not only that, but the German Supreme Court gets into foreign policy issues, which our Supreme Court never does. So don't forget the Chancellor is somewhat constrained by the other branches of government, the legislative and the judicial.
Everything was quite cordial in their news conference, but there are differences between Germany and the United States right now, mainly on climate issues. Am I correct in that?
I don't believe so much on climate. I think Angela Merkel wants to show her public that she, who led the European Union a couple of years ago when she was president of the European Union for a year, led the European Union toward a very strong commitment on climate change to reduce, I think, carbon emissions by 50% by 2020. And I think she wants to be able to show her public that she helped to bring the Americans along. I think the big differences between Germany and the United States have been recently, of course, in the economic and financial areas, where the Germans have looked in the United States as overstimulating the economy.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Gerry Livingston, for bringing us that perspective on this visit by Angela Merkel to the United States and to the White House today. Even though that's the big news here in Washington, just like in other places around the United States, people are also talking about something else, and that is the death of Michael Jackson. I suppose that Jackson's probably most remembered visit to Washington was back in 1984 when he came to see Ronald and Nancy Reagan. Watch.
Well, isn't this a thriller? I'm delighted to see all of you here today. We haven't seen this many people since we left China. And just think, you all came to see me. No, I know why you're here, and with good reason. To see one of the most talented, most popular, and most exciting superstars in the music world today, Michael Jackson. And Michael, welcome to the White House. I hope you'll forgive me, but we have quite a few young folks in the White House who all wanted me to give you the same message. They said to tell Michael, please give some TLC to the PYTs.
All right, whatever that means. And I suppose when we talk about Michael Jackson and his art, it's kind of important to separate the art from the artist, especially in this case, or certainly that is my point of view. Mark Knoller, our White House correspondent, was there when Michael Jackson made that visit. So what was that all about, Mark?
Well, Michael Jackson was invited to the White House to get an award and to get a commendation from President Reagan for letting his song be used in some anti-drunk driving public service announcements. The Department of Transportation used one of Michael's songs in their PSAs, and the government wanted to thank Michael for letting it be used. President Reagan was also running for re-election in 1984, and he and his political handlers knew very well that it wouldn't hurt him one bit to be seen side by side with one of the world's superstars, perhaps somebody who may have been even better well-known around the world than was the American president. So they invited Michael Jackson to the White House, and he stood there on the South Lawn between President Reagan and the First Lady, dressed in a resplendent electric blue jacket with gold braids and a sash, and his white glove on his right hand, and his white socks. And he didn't say very much either, Bob. After Ronald Reagan went through a long speech, and even after praising Michael Jackson, saying that Jackson was proof of what you can do with a life when it is free of drug and alcohol abuse, all Michael Jackson said was, "Thank you, Mr. President and Nancy Reagan. I'm honored to be here." That was it. And yet, it was the hottest ticket in town.
That's kind of interesting, isn't it? What you can do with a life. I would have to say myself, Michael Jackson's life was an example of what not to do with a life. But having said that, he did have a great impact on music. Well, earlier, there are other things going on, and we want to go back to Iran now. We talked with Iranian author Roya Hakakakian on the tenuous situation in her country and on the streets of Tehran right now. And then we're going to wind it up today with kind of a sweet ending. We're going to talk to the White House pastry chef, Roland Mesnier. Here are those interviews. Roya Hakakakian is an Iranian. She has been in this country for 25 years. She grew up in a Jewish family in Tehran. Roya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Where do you think this is going?
I think this is going in the direction of a revolution. A lot of people are hard-pressed to call it a revolution, and, you know, they are sitting on the fence and wondering exactly when or how it's going to happen. But, you know, the evolution of the past 30 years in Iran make it extremely clear to me that there is, this is the inevitable part of this is the inevitable destiny of the past 30 years and the direction in which things have been proceeding in Iran. Whether it happens next week, next month, or whether it will take a year or two is unclear. But major change must come to Iran, because there is no way that you can keep the women in Iran, the youth in Iran, content any longer.
Well, you have many contacts there. Are you having difficulty getting through to people, getting information? My sense of it is that we in the West really don't know very much about what's happening there.
That's right. I mean, oftentimes I get information from inside Iran on my Facebook page, and I watch the news on the evening just to see what the lag time is, how long it takes for what I hear through Facebook, what I hear through Twitter or email to appear on major media, and there generally is some lag time, of hours, sometimes even half a day or 24 hours. What I am hearing is that there is a great deal of blood on the streets. In fact, I got an email from a female friend vicariously through an intermediary who says, I'm really scared. There's simply a lot of blood on the asphalt on the street, and they didn't hold anything back in cracking down at the demonstrators in the past 48 hours.
Do you have a sense that there are going to be more demonstrations now, or do you think that part of this is peaked?
Absolutely. I think what I'm confident about is that there's going to be more show of discontent and dissatisfaction. Now, whether it will take the form of people storming the streets once again, or whether it will be in the form of people sitting on the sidewalks holding candles, as they did a couple of nights ago, to commemorate Neda Agha Sultan's memory, or whether they will just place candles in the windows of their homes to remember the fallen individuals, the fallen victims of these past few days, is unclear. But what I'm certain is that the lack of satisfaction and the disenchantment will go on. It will take on as many forms as people can creatively come up with.
How bad has it been for people in Iran in recent years?
Well, I was astounded by the fact that many journalists, reporters, pundits were looking at Iran in the past few years and calling it an incomplete democracy, an emerging democracy, because anyone who has really looked at Iran and followed the state of human rights, civil liberties, activists, newspapers, and journalists knows very well that Iran is the farthest thing there could ever be from a democracy. And so one can say that in 1997, when Khatami came to power, when President Khatami came to power in his landslide, Iran did experience a period of openness, and newspapers started to flourish. But even at that moment of openness, that moment after 20 years since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, that we can point to and say, here was an opening. The Ministry of Intelligence came up with a parallel detention centers in Iran. There were official detention centers, but people were disappearing into these other covert prison systems. And so there was always a shadow government, despite who was in power, who was president in Iran, that was operating. And that's the very scary part of Iran that is at full display right now.
All right, Roya Hakakakian, thank you so much for that insider's point of view. And from what you were saying, we should expect to hear more about what's happening in Iran. This is only the beginning. This is Washington Unplugged. I think if you would ask some of the recent presidents, they would tell you one of the most important people at the White House was Roland Mesnier, who was the pastry chef. And he's here today and wore his chef's hat just for us. What a career you've had. I mean, how long were you actually at the White House, Roland?
26 years. Mm-hmm. I'm very proud of that because I'm actually the longest running chef in the White House. And I'm so honored and proud to have served.
Started with President Carter?
Yes.
And then?
President Reagan, President George Bush Sr., President Clinton and President George W. Bush.
Well, you've got some wonderful photos. You have these books out now, All the President's Pastries, 25 years in the White House. Picture here of you with what looks like a big Easter egg with Amy Carter.
With Amy Carter, yes. That reminds of a lot of great time here. That was just at the beginning when I just came to the White House, and I was quite amazed by the White House. What a place, you know. It was, for me, such an honor to be there and work there. That's unbelievable.
If there's one thing to be said about your work, it is creative. I noticed this looks like a breakfast setting here, bacon and eggs, but I understand these are all pastries that you have made, and it was to honor Bud Sperling,
exactly,
the longtime editor of the Christian Science Monitor, Washington reporter, who was famous for holding these breakfast news conferences with reporters from around town. How did you come up with that?
Well, because when I find out who he was and what he was doing, and I knew that President Clinton, you see, President Clinton always loved to be right on cue on thing, and I thought that would be the best thing to ever reproduce is his breakfast table. That's how people knew him. And the funniest thing, the day we rolled the cake into the dining room, President Clinton was there with all the guests, and we had it on a cart, and in front of the president, we lost a wheel on the cart. So here I was on 4, trying to just fix the cart in front of the guest. That was not a pretty scene. But the cake was okay. Everybody loved the cake. I don't think they ever saw me doing that, but that was a little bit an embarrassing moment for me.
Some of these things are just extraordinary. I mean, here you are with Hillary Clinton when she was First Lady Hillary Clinton, not Secretary of State. Yes. And these are what, gingerbread?
All gingerbread house. That was the Mount Vernon, the first White House, the Washington Monument, and the Jefferson Monument that we can see in the back. And all that was achieved in a very short period of time because we just did not have the time, you see. And that night was quite an incredible day. You know, at the White House, for that, we worked 24 hours no stop to serve all the guests that had been invited in the White House. That was an amazing day.
Now, how long would it take you to do something like that?
A creation like this took about 3 weeks work.
3 weeks?
3 weeks work. And several people working on it, maybe 4 or 5 people.
Now, here's the late Benazir Bhutto who came, and she liked your work.
She was a wonderful lady, and I'm so sad to know what happened later on in her life. But yes, she came to see me in my pastry shop after lunch that she had with Mrs. Clinton and other guests. And she made a special request that day. She asked Mrs. Clinton if she could take me home with her. And I would have liked to be honest. You know, a change of scenery. And Mrs. Clinton said, listen, you can have anything you like. Piece of furniture, whatever you see. But you cannot take Roland back home. He here's to stay. I took that as a very nice compliment.
There are so many pictures here, so many memories. Here is one with the Clintons, and this is a gingerbread house. This was Bill Clinton's house?
Exactly, where he was born and raised, and we duplicated that of gingerbread totally. And you know, when he saw the house for the first time, I saw the president having a little tear coming down on the corner of his eye. He was very touched that we had done that for him for Christmas. Truly, he was touched.
Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan?
Yes, absolutely wonderful. Loved President Reagan's humor. Always had something very nice to say to the staff. Always in good mood, always in great humor. But Mrs. Reagan was a true perfectionist. Everything had to be just the way she wanted it. As we used to say in the White House, it's Nancy's day or the highway.
Nancy's way or the highway. And here are the first George Bush and Barbara Bush.
Wonderful.
What was it like to cook for them?
You know, the Bush family is a traditional American family with the kids and the dog and everybody. And Mrs. Bush, a fantastic first lady, always told you what she thought. As you know, she don't go around the band if she has to tell you something. And if she would see me somewhere around the White House, maybe chit-chatting with someone, she would always come and smack me on my arm, said, Roland, don't you have any cookies to bake?
And here is the more recent George Bush and Laura Bush.
I appreciate them a lot. And President George W. Bush is very much like his mother, speaks exactly, tell you what he thinks and what he sees. And And I've missed all of them, to be honest. The 26 years in the White House went very fast. It looks like a long time, but it was actually a short time. And I've loved every single family dearly, I must say, and miss them all. I'm still worried about them, what they're eating at night when I'm not here.
This George Bush had a little sweet tooth, didn't he?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. As a matter of fact, it's funny. All the presidents served at sweet tooth. But when they came to the White House first, they would say, we don't really care for sweet. But within 2 weeks, that was totally changed. I got them hooked bad.
Do you think you'll ever go back?
I doubt it, but I always like to visit. That's always nice. But now I've kind of started something else by traveling all over the United States, which I never did before, and love to see this great, beautiful country. America is absolutely the best in the world, in every shape or form. I'm just in love with this country. It's beautiful. So now I have the chance to travel and visit and meet so many beautiful people everywhere. Otherwise, before that, I was pretty much locked into the White House and work, which this is what I was supposed to do. And I always used to say, if they want to see me, they know where to find me, in my pastry shop.
All right. Roland Mesnier, the book is All the Presidents, Pastries, 25 Years at the White House. A pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. The honor is all mine. Thank you.
And that's it for Washington Unplugged for this week. Don't forget to watch us on television Sunday morning. We'll be talking about the situation in Iran on Face the Nation.